The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the community center, casting long shadows across the empty hallway. It was that quiet hour between the afternoon children's classes and the evening adult programs, a brief moment of peace that Sophia Chen had come to treasure. The building seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next wave of noise and activity. Sophia slipped into the small music room at the end of the corridor, her footsteps echoing slightly on the worn wooden floors. Teaching 3 back-to-back piano classes for energetic 8-year-olds had left her mentally drained, but there was still one thing that could restore her spirit. The old upright piano in this forgotten corner of the building wasn't much to look at. Its oak finish had dulled over years of use, and a few of the ivory keys had yellowed with age. But it had a warmth to its sound that the flashier grand piano in the main performance hall somehow lacked. She set her coffee cup on top of the piano and sat down on the bench, adjusting her posture out of habit. 24 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and glasses that kept sliding down her nose, Sophia didn't look like someone who harbored a deep secret. Yet as her fingers hovered over the keys, she felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the ghost of old fears. Even alone, she hesitated. "Just for me," she whispered to herself, a ritual reminder. Just for me. Her fingers descended, finding their places without conscious thought, and the opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the small room. She played softly at first, as if testing the waters, but soon the music pulled her in like an old friend. Her body swayed slightly as her hands danced across the keys, the piece flowing through her with the ease that comes only from years of devotion. Music had been Sophia's first language, taught by her grandmother long before she started school. The piano had been her confidant through a lonely childhood where books and sheet music made more sense than playground politics. But what had once been her greatest joy had also become the source of her deepest shame, a story she shared with no one at the community center, where she'd worked for the past 18 months. Lost in the music, Sophia didn't notice the door, opening slightly. She didn't see the small audience gathering outside, staff members pausing on their way to evening preparations, drawn by the unexpected beauty floating down the hallway. As the final notes hung in the air, a slow clapping broke the spell. "Not bad for a community center teacher," a male voice said, the compliment undercut by its condescending tone. Sophia's head snapped up, her cheeks flushing instantly. Standing in the doorway was Jack Reynolds, the newly hired music director. Tall and lean, with carefully styled hair and an expensive watch that he seemed to find ways to display in every conversation, Jack had arrived 3 weeks ago with an impressive resume and an ego to match. I was just practicing," Sophia stammered, closing the piano lid with trembling hands. Being caught playing felt strangely intimate, like being walked in on while changing clothes. "Practicing is certainly what you need," Jack said, entering, the room fully now. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. "Your interpretation is quaint, very safe, like listening to someone who learned by YouTube tutorials." Behind him, 3 other staff members hovered uncomfortably in the hallway. Nora from accounting, Pete the facilities manager, and Lynn, who taught violin on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Their presence made the critique even more humiliating. The Debussy piece requires a certain delicacy, a touch that comes from proper classical training, Jack continued, seemingly oblivious to Sophia's discomfort. "Where did you study? Community? College program?" I have a degree from State," Sophia said quietly, gathering her belongings. "State University's music program was respectable, if not prestigious." "Ah," Jack nodded, as if this explained everything. "Well, that makes sense. I did my graduate work at Juilliard." He mentioned the famous conservatory casually, the way someone might drop a celebrity's name at a dinner party. "You know, if you're interested in improving, I could recommend some basic exercises to help with your technique. Your rhythm gets a bit unpredictable in the middle section." Each word landed like a small slap. Sophia knew she should defend herself, say something witty or confident, but her throat felt tight, and the familiar feeling of panic began to rise. This was why she played alone. This was why she had chosen to teach beginners instead of performing. "Thank you for the offer," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should get ready for my next class." Jack stepped aside with an exaggerated gesture, like a doorman at a fancy hotel. "By all means. The beginner's class in room 4, right? That's more your speed, I think. Leave the classical repertoire to those with the training to do it justice." As Sophia hurried past him, clutching her coffee mug and music folder to her chest like a shield, she caught Lynn's sympathetic gaze. But no one said anything. No one challenged Jack's assessment or offered a kind word to soften the blow. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Sophia taught her adult beginners class on autopilot, smiling and nodding and offering encouragement while inside. She replayed Jack's comments over and over. Had her tempo really been unpredictable? Was her interpretation too safe? The questions gnawed at her confidence, reopening old wounds. Later, as she packed up to leave, Lynn appeared at her classroom door. "Don't let Jack get to you," Lynn said, leaning against the doorframe. "He talks to everyone like that." "It's fine," Sophia said automatically, zipping up her bag with more force than necessary. "He's entitled to his opinion. His opinion comes with a side of jerk sauce," Lynn replied, which finally pulled a small smile from Sophia. "Seriously, though, you play beautifully. I've heard you a few times when I'm setting up for my violin lessons." The compliment, though kind, only made Sophia more self-conscious. "I don't usually play where people can hear me." Lynn tilted her head, curiosity in her eyes. "Why not? You're really good." Sophia shrugged, avoiding eye contact as she flipped off the lights. "I just prefer teaching to performing." They walked together to the parking lot, the spring evening still holding enough light to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Lynn chatted about upcoming events at the center, seemingly determined to move past the awkward encounter with Jack. Sophia was grateful, but the knot in her stomach remained. At home that night, in her small apartment with its paper-thin walls and noisy radiator, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out an old shoebox from underneath. Inside were newspaper clippings, competition programs, and photographs, evidence of a different life, a different Sophia. "Piano prodigy wins regional championship," one headline announced above a photo of a 13-year-old Sophia, serious-faced, and already struggling with the weight of expectations. Another showed her at 16 accepting a trophy nearly as big as she was. And then there was the final clipping, the one she could barely stand to look at but couldn't bring herself to throw away. "Rising star suffers meltdown at national competition." The accompanying photo caught her mid-flight as she ran from the stage, tears streaming down her face after freezing during Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The piece she had practiced for months, the piece she knew by heart, but couldn't remember once the spotlight hit her and the whispers of the audience reached her ears. That day had changed everything. The panic attacks started soon after, making each subsequent performance attempt more terrifying than the last. Eventually, her parents' disappointment turned to concern, then resignation. The competition circuit, the prestigious conservatory, dreams, the concert career, all of it slipped away as Sophia retreated to the safety of private practice and teaching. No one at the community center knew this history. To them, she was just Sophia, the quiet piano teacher who was good with kids and always brought homemade cookies to staff meetings. As she put the box away, her phone buzzed with a text from Lynn. "Community Center annual fundraiser meeting tomorrow. At 2. Be there. They're discussing the musical program and I refuse to sit through it alone." Sophia texted back a thumbs-up emoji, but her stomach clenched at the thought. The annual fundraiser was the center's biggest event, a chance to showcase talent and convince donors to open their wallets. Last year, she had managed to avoid any involvement beyond helping her youngest students play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in unison. This year, with Jack in charge of the musical program, she planned to keep an even lower profile. The last thing she needed was his critical eye evaluating her or her students. She would attend the meeting, say as little as possible, and volunteer for something safely behind the scenes, like program design or refreshments. As she got ready for bed, Sophia couldn't help glancing at her electronic keyboard in the corner of the living room. Despite the day's humiliation, her fingers itched to play. Music had always been her refuge, even when it was also the source of her deepest fears. She sat down and put on headphones so as not to disturb her neighbors. Almost without conscious thought, her hands began playing the opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece that had broken her. She still knew it perfectly, her muscle memory untouched by the years of avoidance. But after a minute, the familiar tightness gripped her chest, and she switched to a simpler piece, something that didn't carry the weight of failure. Tomorrow would be another day of pretending to be less than she was, of hiding her gift and her past. But for now, in the quiet of her apartment with only herself as audience, Sophia allowed herself to play with all the emotion and skill she possessed, the talent Jack Reynolds had so casually dismissed. The community center buzzed with activity as staff members gathered for the fundraiser planning meeting. Plastic chairs scraped against the floor as people found their seats around, tables pushed together in the staff lounge. The room smelled of coffee and someone's microwaved lunch, the fluorescent lights casting everyone in an unflattering glow. Sophia slipped in just as the meeting was about to start, spotting Lynn waving from the far corner. She hurried over, nearly tripping over a laptop cord, and slid into the empty chair beside her friend. "Cutting it close," Lynn whispered, sliding a paper cup of coffee toward her. "Saved you some of the good stuff from the teacher's lounge, not the watery mess from the machine." "Thanks," Sophia whispered back, grateful for both the coffee and Lynn's friendship. "Had a student who needed extra help after class, Director Patel, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who ran the community center with equal parts warmth and efficiency, called the meeting to order. "All right, everyone. Our annual fundraiser is 6 weeks away and we need to make it spectacular. Last year, we raised enough for new art supplies and halfway to a new roof. This year, we're aiming higher." She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation outlining fundraising goals, donor expectations, and the event schedule. Sophia half listened, sipping her coffee and hoping to remain invisible. Her plan was simple: volunteer for something behind the scenes, avoid Jack Reynolds and anything performance-related, and survive the evening with her dignity intact. "Now for the entertainment portion," Director Patel said, and Sophia's attention snapped back. "Jack, you're our new music director. What do you have planned?" Jack stood, smoothing his already perfectly pressed shirt. "I've developed a program that will showcase the center's highest level of talent. The centerpiece will be a piano performance by Gregory Thompson. He's a former student of mine who's now studying at the Manhattan School of Music." "That sounds wonderful," Director Patel nodded. "But our budget can't cover bringing in outside talent this year." Jack's smile faltered slightly. "Gregory would do it as a favor to me, but I understand your concern. Perhaps we could—" The door burst open, interrupting him. Nora from accounting rushed in, face flushed. "Sorry I'm late. Just got off the phone with Gregory Thompson's assistant. He can't make it. Some competition in Vienna that weekend." A heavy silence fell over the room. Jack's expression darkened. "That's unfortunate," he said, his tone suggesting it was far worse than unfortunate. "I'll need to rethink the program entirely." "What about someone local?" suggested Pete from Facilities. "We've got plenty of talent right here." "Like who?" Jack scoffed. "The fundraiser needs to impress donors. We need someone with classical training, professional-level skills." His eyes swept the room, deliberately avoiding Sophia. "The piano performance is the highlight of the evening." Lynn straightened in her chair. "What about Sophia?" Every head turned toward her. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" she and Jack said simultaneously. "Sophia's amazing," Lynn continued, ignoring Sophia's wide-eyed stare and subtle headshake. "I've heard her play. She could definitely handle it." Jack gave a short laugh. "No offense to our beginner piano teacher, but this event requires someone who can play at a professional level. I heard Ms. Chen play yesterday, and while she's adequate for teaching children the basics, this is hardly— I think it's a wonderful idea," Director Patel interrupted. Sophia, would you consider it? It would be lovely to showcase our own staff talent. All eyes were on her now. Sophia's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I really don't think, Jack began. She'll do it, Lynn said firmly, giving Sophia's hand a squeeze under the table. Excellent. Director Patel smiled, already moving on. Now, for decorations. The meeting continued, but Sophia heard nothing. She was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. Why hadn't she spoken up? Why hadn't she firmly refused? The thought of performing in front of a room full of people, judging eyes, whispers, the weight of expectations, made her feel physically ill. As soon as the meeting ended, she grabbed Lynn's arm and pulled her into the empty art room across the hall. What were you thinking? She hissed, pacing between paint-splattered tables. I can't perform at the fundraiser. Lynn looked genuinely confused. Why not? You're incredible. I've heard you play when you think no one's listening. That's different. Playing alone it's private. It's for me. Sophia pushed her glasses. Up her nose, a nervous habit. I can't play in front of people, I just can't. Because of what Jack said. Don't let that guy get in your head, it's not about Jack. Sophia's voice rose, then dropped again as she glanced at the door. You don't understand. I haven't performed in public since I was 16. Lynn's expression softened. Why? What happened? Sophia sank into a child-sized chair, suddenly exhausted. The secret she'd kept for so long pressed against her chest like a physical weight. Maybe it was time to let someone in. I was supposed to be a prodigy, she said quietly. I started playing when I was 4. By 12, I was winning competitions, all over the state. Everyone said I was destined for Juilliard, for concert halls, for greatness. Lynn sat beside her, silent and attentive. Then came the National Young Artists Competition when I was 16. The biggest opportunity of my young career. Scouts from top conservatories, scholarship committees, even a record label representative. Sophia's voice grew strained. I walked on stage, sat at this beautiful grand piano in front of hundreds of people, and I froze. The memory was still vivid. The hot lights, the murmuring audience, the gleaming black piano that suddenly seemed like an enemy rather than a friend. I couldn't remember the first note. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even place them on the keys. After 30 seconds of silence, I ran off the stage in tears. She swallowed hard. It was in the papers. Piano prodigy's meltdown. My teachers called it stage fright. My doctor called it performance anxiety. Whatever it was, it ended everything. Oh, Sophia, Lynn said softly. I had no idea. No one here knows. I've spent 8 years trying to forget it happened. Sophia looked up, her eyes pleading. I can't go through that again. The panic attacks started right after. I couldn't even play at my college recitals without medication, and even then it was torture. That's why I teach now. It's safe. Lynn was quiet for a moment, processing. So that's why Jack's comments hit so hard. Sophia nodded. He has no idea who I used to be, what I was capable of, and I want to keep it that way. Please, you have to help me get out of this performance. Before Lynn could respond, the art room door opened. Jack stood there, his expression unreadable. Ms. Chen, a word? He said, his tone formal. Lynn squeezed Sophia's shoulder before leaving, shooting Jack a warning glance as she passed. Once they were alone, Jack closed the door and leaned against a supply cabinet. I want to be clear about the fundraiser. Sophia braced herself for more condescension. This event is extremely important for the center's financial future, he continued. We need to impress potential donors, which means presenting the highest quality performances possible. I understand, Sophia said, finding her voice. And I agree completely. That's why I'm going to speak with Director Patel and explain that I'm not the right person for... I've already spoken with her, Jack interrupted. She's quite enthusiastic about having staff members featured, says it creates a family atmosphere that donors respond to. He didn't bother hiding his skepticism. However, I've convinced her to let me hold auditions, just to ensure quality control. Sophia felt a flicker of hope. An audition would be her chance to play badly on purpose, to prove him right about her inadequacy and escape the performance altogether. "Fine," she said. "When?" "Tomorrow. 4 o'clock. After your last class." He straightened his tie. "I'm not expecting miracles, Ms. Chen. Just bring something simple that you can manage without embarrassing the center. A Mozart sonata, perhaps. The easier ones are quite accessible even for amateur players." Each word was carefully chosen to diminish. In another life, Sophia would have informed him that she had performed Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 20 in D minor with the Youth Symphony at age 14. Instead, she simply nodded. 4 o'clock, she repeated. "I'll be there." After Jack left, Sophia remained in the art room, surrounded by children's paintings and the faint smell of clay. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lynn. "Don't let him win. Show him who you really are." But that was exactly what Sophia was afraid of. She didn't know who she really was anymore. The promising young pianist whose future seemed limitless, or the frightened teacher who played only when no one was listening. That night, she sat at her keyboard for hours, playing scales and simple pieces, deliberately hitting wrong notes, trying to find the balance between obviously terrible and merely mediocre. But her fingers, trained through thousands of hours of practice, rebelled against the intentional mistakes. Even when her mind wanted to fail, her hands remembered excellence. Around midnight, exhausted and frustrated, she pulled out the sheet music for Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece that had been her downfall, the piece she still played in private moments when she needed to remember who she used to be. Her neighbors were probably asleep, so she put on headphones and began to play, softly at first, then with growing confidence. The complex emotion of the piece washed over her, longing, triumph, delicate beauty giving way to thunderous power. For these private moments, there was no audience to please, no judges to impress, no expectations to fulfill. There was only Sophia and the music that had once been her entire world. Tomorrow she would play badly enough to escape the fundraiser performance. She would protect herself from public failure and humiliation. She would remain safely invisible. But tonight, in the solitude of her apartment, Sophia Chen played like the prodigy she had once been, with passion, precision, and a soul that spoke through her fingertips, if only for herself. 4 o'clock approached, with the inevitability of an oncoming train. Sophia sat in her classroom after her last student had gone, watching the minute hand tick forward on the wall clock. The room still echoed with the cheerful mistakes of beginners, wrong notes played with enthusiasm, rhythms that wandered like curious children, small victories celebrated with high fives. Teaching had been her refuge these past years. Here, music was joyful and imperfect. Here no one expected brilliance or perfection, only patience and encouragement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lynn. "Good luck today. Remember who you are." That was exactly the problem. Sophia wasn't sure anymore. Was she the terrified performer whose career had ended in public humiliation? The quiet teacher who hid her talent? Or somewhere in between, someone who could reclaim part of herself without risking everything? "This is ridiculous," she muttered, gathering her sheet music. "Just play badly, get it over with." She had selected Mozart's Sonata in C major K, 545, a piece often assigned to intermediate students. She knew it inside out, had taught it dozens of times. Playing it poorly should be easy. A few hesitations, some fumbled passages, perhaps a memory slip halfway through. Just enough to convince Jack that she wasn't fundraiser material, but not so terrible that she'd lose credibility as a teacher. The performance hall was empty when she arrived, the grand piano waiting on the small stage like a sleeping beast. Sophia approached it cautiously, running her fingers along its polished edge. Unlike the worn upright she usually played, this Steinway had been recently tuned, its black surface gleaming under the stage lights. She set her music on the stand, though she didn't need it. Then she sat, adjusting the bench, flexing her fingers. Just get through this, she told herself. Play mediocre. Escape. The door at the back of the hall opened and Jack walked in. He wasn't alone. "Hope you don't mind," he called as he made his way down the aisle. Director Patel wanted to sit in, and a few others expressed interest. Behind him came Director Patel, Lynn, Pete from Facilities, and 3 other staff members Sophia recognized from around the center. Her heart sank. One person was manageable. A crowd was a nightmare. "We're all excited to hear you play," Director Patel said warmly, taking a seat in the front row. "No pressure at all. This is just to help Jack plan the program." But there was pressure. 7 pairs of eyes watched her, 7 people waiting to judge her performance. Sophia felt sweat beading at her hairline, her mouth going dry. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Chen," Jack said, his tone suggesting he was prepared for disappointment. He sat a few seats away from the others, notebook open, pen poised. Sophia placed her hands on the keys. They were trembling visibly. "Perfect," she thought with grim humor. "At least I don't have to fake the nerves." The first notes of the Mozart sonata filled the hall, hesitant, a bit too quiet. She kept her eyes fixed on the sheet music, deliberately ignoring dynamics, playing mechanically. This wasn't so bad. She could feel Jack's disapproval from here, could practically see him making notes about her inadequacy. But then something unexpected happened. As the familiar piece progressed, a strange calm began to settle over her. The piano, responsive and beautiful, seemed to invite her in, to welcome her back to a world she'd abandoned. Without conscious thought, her touch became more sensitive, the phrasing more natural. The music began to breathe. "No," she scolded herself internally. "Play worse. This is too good." She tried to stiffen her wrists, to rush the tempo, but her body rebelled. 8 years of avoidance fell away, and the musician she'd once been, the one who played from the heart, began to emerge. By the second movement, she'd forgotten her plan entirely. The lyrical andante flowed from her fingers with delicate expression, each note placed with care, each phrase shaped with intention. She closed her eyes, no longer seeing the sheet music she didn't need, no longer seeing the audience she'd been dreading. It was just Sophia and the piano again, the way it had been before fear took everything away. When the final chord of the third movement faded, there was silence. Sophia opened her eyes, suddenly remembering where she was and what she'd done. Instead of playing poorly, she'd revealed herself completely. Director Patel was the first to speak. "Sophia, that was extraordinary." Lynn was beaming, giving her a thumbs up from her seat. Pete and the others looked pleasantly surprised. But it was Jack's expression that caught Sophia off guard. He sat perfectly still, pen frozen above his notebook, eyes slightly widened. Sophia began, not sure what to say. "Sorry I didn't play badly. Sorry I've been hiding." "Where did you study?" Jack asked, his voice different now, curious rather than condescending. "State University," she answered automatically. "But before that I was on track for conservatory. I had private instructors from the time I was 6. Why are you teaching beginners?" The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely puzzled. Sophia hesitated. She could lie, make up some story about preferring to teach. But she was tired of hiding, tired of being less than she was. "I developed severe performance anxiety," she said, her voice steady despite the admission. "After a difficult experience at a competition. I haven't performed publicly since I was 16. Understanding dawned on Jack's face. "The Young Artist Competition 2016, you're that Sophia Chen." Her stomach dropped. Of course he would know. The classical music world was small, and public failures had a way of becoming legendary. "Yes," she said quietly. Director Patel looked confused. "I'm not following." Jack set down his pen. Sophia Chen was considered one of the most promising young pianists in the country. She won multiple regional competitions, performed with several youth symphonies. There was talk of Juilliard, Curtis, international competitions. He looked at Sophia with new eyes. Then she disappeared from the circuit after an incident. Froze on stage, Sophia said flatly, wanting to control her own narrative. Couldn't play a note. Ran off crying. End of story. End of career. A heavy silence fell over the hall. But you just played beautifully, Director Patel said gently, without any sign of anxiety. That was different. Sophia struggled to explain. I wasn't really performing, I was just playing, and I wasn't planning to play well. She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. I was actually trying to play badly enough that you wouldn't want me for the fundraiser. Lynn burst out laughing. I knew it. I totally called that. Even Jack's lips twitched toward a smile. If that was you trying to play badly, I'd be very interested to hear you trying to play well. Sophia shook her head. I can't. Not in front of an audience, not at the fundraiser. What happened today was a fluke. Was it? Jack challenged. You just played a Mozart sonata flawlessly, with genuine musicality, in front of 7 people. That's not a fluke. 7 people who weren't judging me, who weren't expecting anything, Sophia countered. The fundraiser would be different. Donors, expectations, pressure. But you'd be playing for us, Director Patel said. For your community center family. People who care about you, not just your performance. Sophia felt torn. Part of her, the part that had been silenced for 8 years, wanted desperately to say yes, to reclaim what she'd lost. But the memory of that devastating failure, the panic attacks that followed, the shame that still lingered, it was too much to risk. I need time to think about it, she finally said. Director Patel nodded understandingly. Of course. But Sophia, for what it's worth, I think you have a gift that shouldn't be hidden. As the others filed out, offering encouraging words and pats on the shoulder, Jack remained behind. Sophia braced herself for some cutting remark, some reminder of her past failure. Instead, he approached the piano slowly, his demeanor completely changed from their previous encounters. I owe you an apology, he said, surprising her. I made assumptions about your abilities that were clearly wrong, and I was unnecessarily harsh. Sophia blinked, not sure how to respond to this unexpected humility. The thing is, Jack continued, I recognize what you're going through. Performance anxiety ended my mother's career as a violinist. I watched her struggle with it for years. Is that why you're so intense about performance standards? Sophia asked cautiously. He nodded. I push people because I know how unforgiving this field can be. But I was wrong to discourage you. You have remarkable talent, Sophia. The use of her first name without the formal Ms. Chen didn't escape her notice. Thank you, she said quietly. But it doesn't change the fact that I can't perform publicly. Not the way I used to. Not without the fear taking over. Jack considered. This. What if we worked up to it? Private sessions first, then small groups, step by step. Why would you want to help me? Because I've been looking for a pianist of your caliber since I arrived, he said simply. And because I was a jerk, and I'd like to make it right. Sophia ran her fingers lightly over the keys, not pressing them, just feeling their smooth surface beneath her fingertips. I don't know if I can. Just think about it, Jack said. The fundraiser is still weeks away. After he left, Sophia remained at the piano, playing softly, testing the waters of her own courage. The Mozart piece had opened a door she'd thought permanently closed, but stepping through it would mean facing her deepest fear, the fear of public failure, of history repeating itself. That evening, she called her grandmother, the woman who had first placed her small hands on piano keys 20 years ago. I played today, Nai, she said when her grandmother answered. Really played, in front of people. Her grandmother's voice, warm and familiar even through the phone, filled her with comfort. I always knew you would find your way back to music, little one. It is too much a part of your soul to stay silent forever. But I'm afraid, Sophia admitted. What if it happens again? Then you will get up and try once more, came the simple reply. Fear only wins if you let it choose your path. After they hung up, Sophia sat at her keyboard, considering her grandmother's Words. Perhaps it was time to choose a different path. Not one without fear, but one where fear no longer made her decisions for her. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece that had once defeated her. This time, instead of stopping when the anxiety rose, she pushed through it, letting the music carry her past the fear. It wasn't perfect. Her hands still trembled at times, and there were moments when the memory of that long-ago failure threatened to overwhelm her. But she continued playing one note at a time, reclaiming not just the music but something of herself as well. The fundraiser was still weeks away. She had time to decide, time to practice, time to remember who she had been and perhaps discover who she could still become. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of practice, panic, and moments of unexpected joy. Sophia had finally agreed to perform at the fundraiser, though her decision changed by the hour. Confidence in the morning giving way to terror by afternoon, determination in the evening crumbling into doubt by midnight. "You're doing great," Lynn reassured her after watching a practice session in the empty performance hall. "Seriously, I got goosebumps." Sophia shook her head, frustration evident in the tense line of her shoulders. "It's still not right. I keep hearing the mistakes before I even make them." "Normal people don't hear those mistakes," Lynn said, leaning against the piano. "Only you do." But Sophia wasn't satisfied with good enough. If she was going to face her fears, if she was going to perform publicly for the first time in 8 years, she wanted it to be worthy of the risk. She wanted to play the way she once had, before fear took everything away, with her whole heart, holding nothing back. The piece she had chosen was the same one that had been her downfall at 16, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Jack had tried to talk her out of it. "It's unnecessarily challenging," he'd argued during one of their practice sessions. "The Mozart you played at the audition would be more than impressive enough." "It has to be this," Sophia had insisted. "I need to face it, to rewrite the ending." Now, with just 5 days until the fundraiser, she was beginning to question that decision. The piece was indeed challenging, technically demanding, and emotionally complex. Some days her fingers flew across the keys with the muscle memory of thousands of hours of childhood practice. Other days they felt stiff and foreign, refusing to obey her musical intentions. Today had been one of the bad days. After Lynn left, Sophia remained at the piano, playing the same passage over and over, trying to smooth out a transition that kept tripping her up. The community center had emptied out for the evening, most of the staff gone, the classrooms dark. Only the security lights illuminated the hallways. "You're rushing it." Sophia jumped at the voice, her hands crashing onto the wrong keys. Jack stood at the back of the hall, barely visible in the dimmed lighting. "Sorry," he said, walking down the aisle toward the stage. "Didn't mean to startle you." "It's fine," Sophia said, though her heart was still racing. "I thought everyone had gone home. I was finishing up some paperwork." Jack set his bag on a front row seat and approached the piano. "Mind if I listen?" A month ago, the question would have sent her running from the room. Now, after weeks of working together, she found herself nodding. "From the beginning of the development section," he suggested, pointing to a spot in the music. Sophia positioned her hands and began to play. The passage started gently, building in complexity and emotion, leading to the moment that kept giving. Her trouble. As she approached it, she felt herself tensing, anticipating the difficulty. "Stop," Jack said. "You're thinking too much. You're playing like you're waiting to fail." The observation stung because it was true. "I can't help it. When I get to that transition, I remember." "Forget what happened before," Jack interrupted. "That performance doesn't exist anymore. There's only this one right now." He moved closer, standing by the piano now. "Close your eyes." "What?" "Close your eyes and play it again. Don't look at the music, don't look at your hands. Just feel it." Sophia hesitated, then closed her eyes. Darkness amplified her other senses. The feel of the keys beneath her fingers, the subtle resistance as she pressed them, the vibration of sound traveling up through her hands. She began to play again. Without visual distractions, she found herself sinking deeper into the music. The transition approached, and instead of tensing, she leaned into it, letting the emotion of the piece carry her through the technical challenge. Her fingers found the notes instinctively, her body remembering what her anxious mind kept forgetting. When she finished the section, she opened her eyes to find Jack watching her with undisguised admiration. That, he said quietly, was the real Sophia Chen. She smiled, a small but genuine expression. She shows up sometimes when I'm not looking. She's always there, Jack insisted. You just have to get out of her way. They worked for another hour, Jack offering suggestions, Sophia implementing them. The dynamic between them had shifted dramatically since that first humiliating encounter. There was still a professional distance, but underneath it, a growing respect and perhaps something more, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. You're going to be amazing on Saturday, Jack said as they packed up for the night. The donors won't know what hit them. If I can actually play, Sophia replied, her old fears never far from the surface. If I don't freeze up again. Jack considered her for a moment. What exactly happened? At the competition? No one had asked her that question in years. Everyone who knew had tiptoed around it, treating it like a shameful secret. I was 16, she began slowly, closing the piano lid with, "Got it." The National Young Artists Competition was the biggest opportunity of my life, full scholarship to the conservatory of my choice if I won. My parents had sacrificed everything for my training, extra jobs, remortgaging the house for better instruments, driving hours for lessons with the best teachers. Jack nodded, listening intently. The pressure was... Sophia shook her head, remembering. Overwhelming doesn't even begin to describe it. By the time I walked on stage, I was already in a state of panic. My heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. My hands were ice cold and shaking. Stage fright, Jack said. It happens to everyone. Not like this, Sophia continued. I sat down at the piano and suddenly I couldn't remember the first note. It was like my mind just emptied out. I stared at the keys, and they looked foreign, like I'd never seen a piano before. The silence from the audience got heavier and heavier, and all I could think was that I was letting everyone down, my parents, my teachers, myself. She swallowed hard, the memory still painful after all these years. So I ran. Off the stage, out of the building, all the way to the parking lot where my mom found me hyperventilating behind a dumpster. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Not exactly. A triumphant ending to my prodigy story. Jack was quiet for a moment. And you never performed again? I tried a few times in college. Small recitals, class performances. But the panic attacks got worse. I'd need medication just to get through a 5-minute piece, and even then I'd be physically ill for days before and after. Sophia gathered her sheet music, avoiding his eyes. Eventually, I decided it wasn't worth the suffering. Teaching was better. Safer. Until now, Jack said softly. Until now, she agreed. I still don't know if I can do this. You can, he said with surprising gentleness. But even if something goes wrong, even if it's not perfect, it won't be like before. You're not 16 anymore, carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. You're playing for yourself now. His words stayed with her that night as she practiced. In her apartment, headphones on, fingers moving across her electronic keyboard, playing for herself. The concept was both liberating and terrifying. If she was playing for herself, then she alone would determine whether the performance was a success or failure. Not judges, not audiences, not even Jack or Lynn or director, Patel, just Sophia. The night before the fundraiser, she couldn't sleep. She paced her small living room, running through the piece in her head, feeling phantom keys beneath her fingers. Around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep entirely and sat at her keyboard. Instead of practicing the Rachmaninoff again, she played simple pieces from her childhood. The first Bach minuet she'd learned at 6, the Clementi sonatina that had won her a blue ribbon at 8, the Chopin waltz she'd played at her grandmother's 75th birthday. Music that held no pressure, only joy. As dawn broke, casting pale light through her curtains, Sophia felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened tonight, triumph or disaster, she would survive it. Music had been her first love, her truest voice, and she had silenced herself for too long. The day of the fundraiser arrived with perfect autumn weather, clear skies, golden sunshine, a crisp breeze that hinted at the coming winter. The community center buzzed with activity as staff and volunteers transformed the main hall into an elegant venue. White tablecloths covered round tables, each adorned with simple flower arrangements. String lights were hung across the ceiling, creating a warm, magical atmosphere. Sophia arrived early, slipping into the performance hall to practice one last time before the guests arrived. The Steinway had been moved to the center of the small stage, freshly polished for the occasion. She ran through sections of the piece, not playing full out, just reminding her fingers of the journey they would soon take. "How are you feeling?" Director Patel asked, appearing at the side of the stage in an elegant blue dress. "Terrified," Sophia admitted. "But okay, somehow. Ready, I think." "The place looks wonderful," Director Patel said, changing the subject to ease Sophia's nerves. "We've sold more tickets than last year already. Several major donors confirmed this morning." "I'm glad," Sophia said sincerely. The center did important work in the community, providing arts education to children who would otherwise have no access to it. Her own students, many from low-income families, thrived in the supportive environment. As evening approached, Sophia retreated to the small room behind the stage that served as a green room for performers. She changed into the dress she'd borrowed from Lynn, a simple black gown that made her feel both elegant and invisible. She paced the small space, breathing deeply, trying to keep the panic at bay. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Jack, dressed in a charcoal suit that transformed him from demanding teacher to sophisticated music director. "Just checking in," he said. "You're on in 20 minutes." Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Jack seemed to understand. "Remember what we practiced. Eyes closed if you need to. Just you and the music." "What if I can't do it?" she whispered, giving voice to her deepest fear. "What if I freeze again?" "Then you'll take a breath, find your place, and keep going," he said simply, "and we'll all still be here supporting you." He hesitated, then added, "I believe in you, Sophia, not because of who you were as a prodigy, but because of who you are now." After he left, Sophia stood motionless, absorbing his words. Who she was now. Not the frightened teenager running from failure, not even the cautious teacher hiding her gift, but someone new, someone who had faced her fears and chosen to play anyway. Through the walls she could hear the murmur of the gathering crowd, the clink of glasses, the rise and fall of conversation. Soon Director Patel would welcome everyone. There would be speeches, acknowledgments, appeals for donations. And then it would be her turn to step onto the stage, to sit at that gleaming piano, to show everyone, including herself, who she really was. Sophia closed her eyes and imagined the first notes of the Rachmaninoff concerto, feeling them in her fingertips before she played them. Whatever happened next, she would face it with open eyes and an open heart. The music was already inside her, waiting to be set free. The community center's main hall had been transformed. Gone were the folding tables and plastic chairs, replaced by elegant round tables with crisp white cloths. Soft lighting from string lights overhead cast a warm glow over the well-dressed crowd. The usual scent of art supplies and cleaning products had given way to the mingled aromas of catered food and floral centerpieces. From her position behind the curtain, Sophia could see without being seen. She watched as community members mingled, with potential donors, as Director Patel moved confidently from table to table, as Jack charmed a group of older patrons with stories of the children's recent music showcase. Her hands were cold. She rubbed them together, trying to warm her fingers for the performance ahead. The black dress borrowed from Lynn felt suddenly too tight across her chest, making it hard to take a full breath. Sophia closed her eyes, counting slowly. 4 counts. In, hold for 4 counts out. The breathing technique her therapist had taught her years ago. 5 minutes, a volunteer whispered, poking her head through the curtain. Sophia nodded, unable to speak. The buzz of conversation from the hall seemed to grow louder, pressing against her eardrums. She could pick out individual voices now, Lynn laughing at something, Pete discussing the building's new roof, Director Patel introducing herself to someone new, and then Jack's voice cutting through the rest. Everyone, if you could please take your seats. Our musical program is about to begin. There was a shuffle of movement, chairs scraping against the floor, conversations tapering off. Sophia's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat, her fingertips behind her eyes. I can't do this, she whispered to the empty backstage area. I can't. But there was no one to hear her, no one to stop what was already in motion. Out in the hall, Jack had begun his introduction. The community center has always been a place where talent is nurtured, where potential is recognized and developed, he was saying. Tonight, we have a performance that exemplifies that spirit. Sophia felt dizzy, lightheaded. The familiar symptoms of a panic attack crept up on her. Shortness of breath, tingling in her hands, a sense of unreality, as if she were floating outside her body. Our pianist tonight is someone many of you know as a dedicated teacher, Jack continued. What you may not know is that she is also an extraordinarily gifted musician in her own right. Through the fog of anxiety, Sophia felt a flicker of something unexpected. Pride. Jack wasn't just introducing her. He was acknowledging her, seeing her, not as the terrified teenager who had failed so publicly, not as the quiet teacher who hid her talent, but as the musician she truly was. Please welcome Sophia Chen, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor. Applause broke out, surprisingly enthusiastic. Sophia felt her feet moving forward of their own accord, carrying her through the curtain and onto the small stage. The lights were brighter than she'd expected, temporarily blinding her to the audience beyond. She blinked, adjusting to the glare, and made her way to the piano. The Steinway waited, lid raised, keys exposed, both an old friend and a formidable challenge. Sophia sat, adjusting the bench slightly, and took another deep breath. As her eyes adjusted to the lights, she could make out faces in the crowd. Lynn gave her a subtle thumbs up from the back. Her youngest piano students, allowed to stay up late for the special occasion, wiggled excitedly in their seats. Director Patel smiled encouragingly, and in the front row, Jack watched her with quiet confidence, as if he had never doubted her for a moment. Sophia placed her hands on the keys. They were still cold, still trembling slightly. She closed her eyes, remembering Jack's advice from their practice sessions. Just you and the music. Nothing else exists. The first chords of the Rachmaninoff concerto rose from the piano, resonant and powerful. Sophia had chosen to perform a solo piano arrangement rather than the full orchestral version, but the richness of the piece filled the room nevertheless. The famous opening, dark, brooding, intensely emotional, set the stage for everything that followed. For the first minute, Sophia played with technical precision but emotional distance, her body rigid with tension, her mind racing ahead, anticipating problems, monitoring her every move. But as the piece progressed, as the familiar notes flowed from her fingers, something began to shift. The music itself seemed to reach out to her, to pull her in, reminding her why she had fallen in love with it in the first place. This was Rachmaninoff's journey from despair to triumph, from darkness to light. And it was her journey too. By the time she reached the second movement, with its achingly beautiful melody, Sophia had forgotten to be afraid. She had forgotten the audience, forgotten the fundraiser, forgotten everything except the conversation between her hands and the piano. She swayed with the music now, her body relaxed, her face expressive, her entire being focused on creating something beautiful. The final movement arrived with its technical challenges, rapid passages, complex rhythms, moments that required both power and delicacy. But Sophia was ready. her fingers flying across the keys with the muscle memory of thousands of hours of practice, her mind 2 steps ahead, her heart fully present in each note. As she approached the concerto's triumphant conclusion, she felt tears spring to her eyes, not from fear or anxiety but from pure joy. This was who she was meant to be. This was what she was meant to do. Not hiding, not running, but sharing. Her gift with open hands and an open heart. The final chords resonated through the hall, powerful and definitive. Sophia's hands lifted from the keys and hovered for a moment as the sound faded. There was a beat of absolute silence, and then the room exploded with sound, applause, cheers, even some teary sniffles. The audience rose to their feet as one, their faces showing genuine awe and appreciation. Lynn was whistling from the back of the room. Director Patel was wiping tears from her cheeks. Sophia's students were jumping up and down, their small faces beaming with pride for their teacher. Sophia stood on shaky legs and turned to face the crowd, overwhelmed by the response. She had done it. After 8 years of hiding, of fear, of playing only for herself, she had performed again, and it had been beautiful. Her eyes sought Jack in the front row. He was standing with the rest, his face transformed by an expression she had never seen there before. A mixture of admiration, pride, and something deeper, something that made her cheeks warm despite the cool air of the hall. The applause continued as she made her way off the stage on unsteady feet. In the small backstage area, she collapsed into a chair, her body suddenly exhausted, her mind still buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief. The curtain parted, and Jack appeared, his usual composure slightly undone. Hair mussed, tie askew, eyes bright with emotion. "Sophia," he said, his voice unusually gentle. That was... For once, the articulate music director seemed at a loss for words. "I know," she said, smiling through tears. "I felt it too." He held out his hand and she took it, allowing him to pull her to her feet. "They want an encore," he said. "If you're up for it." A month ago, the very idea would have sent her into a panic. Now she felt only a flutter of excitement, a readiness, to return to the instrument that had once been her greatest love and greatest fear. "I think I am," she said, surprising herself. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, handshakes, hugs, and exclamations of amazement. Donors approached her with business cards and offers of future performances. Parents of her students looked at her with new respect. Director Patel announced that the fundraiser had already exceeded its goal, with checks still coming in. But the moment that stayed with Sophia, the one she would remember years later, came after most of the guests had left. She was sitting alone at the piano, playing softly, not ready to let go of the magic of the evening. Jack approached, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "To new beginnings," he said, offering her one. "And old endings," she added, thinking of the 16-year-old girl who had run from the stage in tears, whose story was finally complete. They talked for hours, long after the cleanup crew had finished, long after Director Patel had locked up her office and headed home with the donation, checks safely stowed in her briefcase. They talked about music and fear and second chances, about his mother, who had never found her way back to performance after anxiety took her career, about Sophia's journey from prodigy to teacher to whatever came next. "What does come next?" Jack asked as they finally walked to the parking lot under a sky full of stars. Sophia considered the question. The night's performance had opened doors she had thought permanently closed. But it had also shown her something important about herself. That she was more than her talent, more than her fear, more than any single success or failure. "I don't know exactly," she said honestly, "but I'm not hiding anymore." 2 weeks later, Director Patel called Sophia into her office. "I've had an interesting development since the fundraiser," she said, sliding a piece of paper across her desk. "One of our major donors was so moved by your performance that they've offered to fund a scholarship program." Sophia picked up the paper, scanning the details. "The Sophia Chen Performance Anxiety Scholarship? For talented students facing performance challenges," Director Patel confirmed. "They want you to oversee it, teaching, mentoring, curriculum development, full-time position if you're interested. Sophia felt tears welling up again. Yes, I'm interested. That evening she sat at her keyboard at home playing not Rachmaninoff or Mozart, but a piece of her own composition, something new, something that spoke of both struggle and triumph, of fear faced and overcome. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Dinner tonight to celebrate your new position. I know a place with a piano in the bar. No pressure to play, but no pressure not to play either. Sophia smiled, thinking of how far she had come in such a short time, from hiding her talent to sharing it openly, from believing her story had ended at 16 to writing a new chapter at 24. She texted back, yes to dinner, yes to the piano, yes to whatever comes next. Outside her window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sophia played on, her fingers strong and sure on the keys, her heart full of music that was meant to be heard.